Today on Bridges, we're going to talk about how to stay in love and keeping your marriage in good shape. My guest says marriage is a lot like dancing in the kitchen. It's supposed to be fun, but it's harder than it looks. I'm so glad that you could join us today for Bridges. I'm Monica Schmelter, and my guest is author and artist Debbie Cunningham, and we're going to talk about hope and help for staying in love. And Debbie, it's good to have you on Bridges today.
Thank you so much for letting me be here. I'm thrilled.
Well, I know that marriage is very important to you, and I love the title of your latest book, Dancing in the Kitchen. What is that about?
Well, it's not really about dancing in the kitchen, although it can be. It's actually, that is a line from a song, because I'm a jazz recording artist, and that's a line from a song called A Million Kisses. And in the bridge, it says, I want the kind of love that dances in the kitchen when the skies are turning gray. And that's where we got the title of the book.
Yeah. Now, you know, we talk about hope and help for staying in love, and we know, Debbie, like even amongst Christian circles and in Christian marriages, that it's really hard for a marriage to last. So many of them end up broken and in divorce. Is that why you wrote the book?
It's partially why I wrote the book. I mean, I've been married for over 30 years.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. It's definitely an achievement, right?
Yes, it is. It's a monumental achievement these days.
And I'm married to my high school sweetheart. So we basically grew up together. But, you know, we have a great relationship, and I dearly love my husband, but I want it to stay that way. And as I was watching, we were watching all of our friends. Some of them have fallen apart and gotten divorced, which made me incredibly sad. I was impacted through divorce as a child of divorce. And so I just saw, why are so many people falling out of love instead of staying in it? And I really wanted to encourage couples to stay together. And so I began kind of looking around to see, what does that really take?
Yeah, because it takes a whole lot. And obviously we're not real sure about what it takes because there are so many divorces.
Right.
I know when I run into people that I haven't seen for years, I stopped asking, how's your wife, how's your husband? Because so many times I got the answer back, well, we're not together anymore, or we divorced. And that was even in the midst of people that, when I looked at them, it seemed that the marriage was strong. It seemed that they were really strong Christians. And so that's heartbreaking, you know, that there are so many divorces and that there's so much hurt. But take us into dancing in the kitchen. What does it look like to stay in love?
Well, I think that a lot of marriages fall apart because they stop connecting emotionally. You know, we're made for emotional intimacy, not just physical intimacy, but emotional intimacy. And a lot of couples, they stop doing fun things together. Dancing in the kitchen is that element of lightheartedness in your relationship that I'm trying to encourage couples to cultivate once again. In the book, I have interviews of couples who have gone through really hard seasons and stayed together. And what we talk about there is how they move back to that lightheartedness and that deeper connection in their relationship.
And I love in the book, and she does give lots of personal examples and stories in the book. I love that because it's really one of the things that none of us think about. For example, you mentioned you married your high school sweetheart. None of us are, I don't think, in high school thinking about the really tough seasons of life and how they're going to affect us. You know, nobody thinks about when they get married that they might lose a child, and in all of that grief, how do you stay connected to your spouse? They say that sometimes that's a major reason for divorce. So could you give us a highlight of one of the stories in tough seasons and how they managed to cultivate that emotional intimacy and lightheartedness in the midst of big grief?
Right. Well, two stories I would highlight is one is another couple who went through terminal illness in one of the spouses, in the wife actually, and how they cultivated staying together and moving through that season was difficult. But they found ways to have fun and to find lighthearted connection at home, because she became bedridden at one point. And they learned to do things that they changed their idea of what, or their expectation of normal. And they found ways to connect at home, especially today, in this day and age. You can watch movies at home. There are so many things you can do at home to really cultivate connection, and they tried to have fun together there. Also, in my own experience, my daughter did not pass away, but when she was 3, she was diagnosed with a heart condition that could have been potentially fatal. and she did have the surgery, but during the months coming up to that were extremely difficult.
Yeah.
And I talk about in the book how fragile our relationship was, even though we love each other. There was like no bandwidth for cultivating our marriage because we were so absorbed with, we had a newborn baby and a daughter who was facing a life-threatening surgery. And my actual doctor said, you've got to have fun in your relationship. You've got to find ways to relieve the stress where you're enjoying your time together. Mm-hmm. And so I think that is one of my real takeaways. Something you can do even today is that find ways to have fun with your spouse, like you did when you were dating.
Yeah. Well, because that's the whole thing. You know, like when you're in that dating, I'm sure you all remember, or courtship, you look forward to time together, you're able to go out. You're not thinking about paying bills or like who has to do the laundry or like the tougher stuff. Like when you say you had an infant, and that's real, an infant child and a daughter, was it a heart complication?
Yes, a heart complication.
Yeah, so that's hard to think about having fun. Like I think I might almost feel guilty to have fun.
Absolutely, and I did.
With a sick child.
I did. Because I thought, how can I go and have fun when this might be the last few days I have with my child or the last few weeks I have with my child, but in healthy, even just physical health, we have to take care of our mind and our body in this relationship as well, and we have to cultivate that connection with our spouse, and I think it's really important. Here's the thing, when we were first dating, we had fun without responsibilities.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So when you have fun with your spouse, do not talk about the issues. You have to pull back the curtain and really focus on your husband or wife and go, you know what, I know we have issues, and I know life isn't grand, and dating doesn't fix everything, but we can have fun together. We can laugh together, and laughter is good medicine.
Yes,
that
it
is
is
scriptural.
Yes, it is.
And it's really important.
It is, and I know that I thought some of the best advice I ever got was actually just along the lines of what you're saying. My husband and I, once a week, will plan something fun, and during that time, we are not allowed to speak about any issues. And that doesn't make any issues go away or the problem's not there. It's just like an issue-free zone.
Yes.
Where Joe and Monica just get to be Joe and Monica, and we just get to laugh and be ridiculous.
Yes.
And it gives me something really to look forward to, you know, because I tend to be a type A, very serious person. I want to fix everything, everybody. I just want it to be perfect, you know?
We all do.
And it's just not.
No, it's not. And you know, and I think that we lose that element of fun because if we do get that time with our spouse, I think it's difficult and we have to be intentional.
Yeah.
And I think in marriages, we've gotten lax about intentionality.
Yeah.
We make our life plan for our businesses. We put down our goals of where we want to be in 2000, whatever year it is, and we forget to make those same kinds of goals in our marriage. Where do you want to be in your relationship?
For what's most important,
Right.
Our marriage and our family. So Debbie Cunningham has authored this book, Dancing in the Kitchen, but you're also a jazz recording artist.
I am.
And I am so glad that you are going to be here and perform with us today. The name of the song is called A Million Kisses, so take a look.
Kisses, kind of love, the kind that every woman and little girl is dreaming of. That kind of romance doesn't come from one night, but through days and years, happiness and tears, until things work out right. Hand in hand, walking through the rain, or with stars up above. I want a million kisses, kind of love. The kind that dances in the kitchen, oh, when the skies are turning gray. The one that holds you oh so tight when the blues just don't go away. the seasons real life is made of. Oh, that kind of romance still makes me swoon. Oh, from the first light of day, seeing your face till shadows are cast by the moon. Hand in hand, walking through the rain, oh, with stars up above. I want a million kisses, kind of love, the kind that dances in the kitchen, oh, when the skies are turning gray. The one that holds you oh so tight when the blues, when those blues, when those blues just don't go away. I want a million kisses, kind of love, the kind that embraces the seasons real life is made of. Oh, that kind of romance still makes me swoon. Oh, from the first light of day, see your face, the shadows are cast by the moon. Oh, hand in hand, walking through the rain, oh, with stars up above. I want a million kisses. I want a million kisses. I want a million kisses, kind of
You can purchase a copy of today's show for $15. Call us at 615-754-0039 or send a check to the address on the screen. Please mention the program number on the screen. Do you have a ministry or business? You can contact Nashville's WHTN for studio and programming rates. Visit ctntv.org/studio or call 615-754-0039 for more details.
Log on to www.ctntv.org, where you can make a prayer request, view our program guide, see who's on bridges, or even watch one of Monica's latest teachings. Log on to www.ctntv.org.
Well, that song was A Million Kisses by Debbie Cunningham. That's the name also of the CD, A Million Kisses. And her book is Dancing in the Kitchen. It's hope and help for staying in love. Thank you for sharing that song with us.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
You know, I think most people have an idea at some point in their life that they want to grow up, they want to fall in love, they want a relationship, a marriage, someone that they can count on and trust in. And we've talked about the importance before the song of lightheartedness in marriage, and yet there's that very serious side that it's a covenant. And you deal with it in your book about even the stories that you tell a couple, you know, that are able to recover from infidelity.
Yes. That is, that story was, I was so thankful that I was able to share that story, because that's a difficult journey to walk. And even as believers, to find out that your spouse has been unfaithful to you, but he was so repentant, And that gave her the capability of forgiveness. With Christ, though, I mean, she said, without God, I could not have forgiven my husband. But God showed her just even the sin in her own life, in her own brokenness, and how Redeemer, Jesus, came to restore all of it. And just how they walked through that was such a precious, precious picture, you know, of what God will do for any one of us who is dealing with brokenness.
Right, but I think, Debbie, that you said the key thing there is that he was really, really repentant. And, you know, forgiveness and the restoration of the relationship are entirely different subjects. And so we're certainly not saying that if infidelities happen that you have to reconcile. But what Debbie is sharing is that if somebody is really repentant, that it's a hard walk, but that recovery is possible.
Yes, and in this particular case, he said, I know that I've broken our covenant. I know that I have destroyed our relationship. He said, I'm asking you to forgive me, and if you would have mercy and grace, I want to restore our relationship, and I'll do whatever it takes. And so it was just a beautiful picture. They're dear friends of ours, and we walked with them through that. And it was a beautiful picture of what God can do with willing hearts.
Yeah. Now, was it a quick thing, or did it take a long time?
No, it was a very long road. This is not a quick fix.
Right.
And most relationships, it's a process of learning, and it continues to be a process. There are these, you know, dances, even if you think about the whole dance metaphor, dances are lighthearted, and then we have these quiet, more intimate moments, but I mean, you have the ebb and flow of the music, even the different tempos of life, that you have different seasons of life, hard seasons, grief, you know, and like you said, illness, financial stress, all of those seasons and all of those things affect your marriage relationship. And that's why it's so important to carve out that space, to have fun, and to build that lightheartedness back without all the other things crowding in around it.
And I think what you said too, Debbie, the intentionality that if we don't say in our marriages and in our families, this is the way it's going to be. We're going to have a date night once a week. We're going to do this, take a trip once a year, or we're going to carve out this time. It doesn't happen, because the other part of dancing in the kitchen and the ebb and flow and the rhythm of life is that there's always something begging for our time, our money, and our attention. And sometimes what we do, especially because we're Christians, is we think, well, that's covenant. It's just always going to be there. I need to tend to this, and the other thing. And before we know it, we've fallen into bad patterns with our spouse.
Yes, and covenant is so important. I mean, covenant is binding. And if you go back, many of these couples reflected on, okay, I'm not really happy with my relationship, but what did I promise to do? What did I covenant to do? And in good times and in bad, in sickness and in health. I'm not saying that, and there's no judgment for anyone who's been divorced.
Absolutely not.
But we have to think about what are those things that we've committed to. And if we've made this commitment, how can we fulfill it? How can we walk in that commitment?
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly, and I appreciate you saying for people that are divorced, there is no judgment, because we haven't walked in any of their shoes. And I do understand, and the older I get, the more I understand, is that sometimes there are betrayals, there are levels of dishonesty, there are addictions, there are things that people can't and won't repent from. And the healthiest thing to do is to separate from that. So there's no judgment. We're talking today, though, to couples that are still married and really have that desire to make that covenant relationship be all that God wants it to be. I was so naive when I got married. I just thought, well, if two people, if you just really love each other and if you love Jesus, like, it will just happen and come together. And it's not like that.
No, I think we all come into this relationship with different backgrounds, different ways of doing things, thinking. The way we even handle finances is different. It depends on your family of origin. And so you have to learn, as two people come together in that, to become one. It's a becoming one. It's not automatic that you just become this one entity spiritually, perhaps, but you have to move toward that unity. And I think Jesus is constantly knitting us together that way as we submit that to him. And you are constantly doing things to come together. It's your intention. But it's a process, even in good marriages.
Well, and we never really get there, because the Bible says that you know, we're made new creatures by the renewing of our mind. That is a process. And so even, you said you've been married how many years?
31 now.
31 years. So you're still working on your unity, right?
Right. Well, now we just entered empty nest season. Okay. So that's a whole new thing to deal with. I mean, great. We love it. We miss the kids. But I mean, that's a whole new season of, and I talk about it in the book, that's another season where your relationship can be fragile. There are a lot of divorces that happen in empty nest 20, 30 years, even 40 years into a marriage. And you think, okay, shouldn't we have this all figured out by now? But what happens is if most of your marriage relationship has been around your children.
Exactly.
If you have children, then what you realize is when that's removed, even your friendships are the parents of your children's friends. I mean, all of a sudden there's this huge gap and you go, wait, how did we get here? And then you have no connection with your spouse. And there's a lot of loneliness. I can't even talk today. Loneliness, and you know, there's just a distance between you and your spouse. You know, there are roommate seasons. I talk about that too, where you feel like you're passing each other in the night. What can you do in that? How can you cultivate that? So, I mean, there are a lot of great stories in there, you know.
And I think it's so important that we open up the conversation about those things because sometimes our expectation was just that we would never have roommate seasons, that we never really gave any thought to being empty nesters because this young couple was so focused on having young kids, middle schoolers, high schoolers, and then what now? So the name of the book is Dancing in the Kitchen, and it is authored by Debbie Cunningham. She's an author, also a jazz recording artist, and so she's offering us today hope and help for staying in love. And I do love that you've got so many stories and examples in the book. Share with us something else that somebody might get from the book.
You know, there's some fun stories in the book too. There's one in particular where a woman lost half of her house.
Half of her house.
Half of her house by her husband's hand. They are still married, happily. And I'm not going to tell you what happened. You have to read the book. But it's a delight.
I'm so curious. By her husband's hand, they lost half the house.
Yeah.
And they're still married.
And they're still married.
And they love each other.
Happily. Yes.
Happily married.
I mean, I thought I would have killed my husband personally. Anyway.
Well, or at least like never let him live that down.
Hold it against him for the rest of his life.
Oh my
That's not a good
goodness,
thing,
that's like a really big thing. No, it's not a good thing. And yet, even in Christian marriages and relationships, we don't always understand forgiveness and how that works. And keeping a record of wrongs is not helpful. I can attest to that. It's not helpful.
No, if you can focus on what they're doing right, that's another thing. If we can start not going, oh, he doesn't take out the trash, or she doesn't do this, or can we start focusing on what they do right and really making intention to notice those things? It'll change your relationship.
Yeah. And you know, not only does it change a relationship, it changes us.
It does.
I mean, that just the positive attitude that we develop by looking for what's right in everything in life, it really helps us as well be able to focus and enjoy the good life that God intends for us. So tell us something else about the book, Dancing in the Kitchen.
Well, there's even a story about an arranged marriage, which is kind of unusual, but
It sounds frightening to me, an arranged
very
marriage, I have to tell you.
I know. Even, even when the woman I interviewed got married, I mean, she met her husband and was married within 3 weeks. I felt like I was having a panic attack when she told me. But what an incredible journey they have, because they commit and make a commitment to love forever, and then they build that love around that commitment.
Yeah.
And it's an amazing story there.
You know, one of my closest friends has an arranged marriage, and she and her husband are madly in love. And they think it's very weird the way that we date and court here in America. She's like, oh, you know, you pick and choose. You're mean to people based on the way they look. Our families helped us. They knew each other. They knew about us. And so I'm just saying that a lot of people think the way that we do it is weird. And Joyce and Gladson have been married now for like 35 years, and they have 3 handsome, smart, strong sons, and they're madly in love, and it's an arranged marriage.
I love that. And you cultivate what you want. You know, when we talk about dating, you know, you cultivate fun in that relationship, you cultivate getting to know that person, and we stop doing that when we get married. We really do.
Yeah.
And it's really important to cultivate that intention.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of once we get married, we kind of think, well, I found the person, like, this is it, now we're married.
Yes, and then we focus on all the bad stuff.
Yeah, well, because we start, you know, you take on all that responsibility with
Yes.
marriage, and quite
Yes.
honestly, the laundry and the dishes and the bills, there's just, yeah, unless you see it in light of the bigger picture, it's really just like a business arrangement, more or less. Like somebody pays the bills, somebody does the laundry. We're keeping life ticking on, but there's not always that substance and that intentionality that you mentioned that's so important to cultivate in a marriage. We've got just a couple of moments left. Is there one last story you might like to highlight or example?
I just want to say that, you know, there are different seasons of life. There's stories about grief in there that grief shows up, and we have to learn how to manage that. And there are seasons of life that we need to learn to manage, but your marriage needs to be priority.
Yeah.
And we can change it if we are intentional and we cultivate that connection.
Yeah. But we have to want it, we have to look for it,
Yes.
and look for ways to make that happen. And this book, Dancing in the Kitchen by Debbie Cunningham, can help. It's all about hope and healing for staying in love. And that is something that is so important, that it's not just to stay married, but to stay in love and have that fun.
Right. I think God wants that.
Oh, I know He does. He didn't create the wonderful institution of marriage so that we could be miserable.
Right.
But we've got to do our part.
Absolutely.
I want to thank you so much, Debbie, for coming and for sharing.
Oh, thank you for having me today. It's been a delight.
So the name of the book again is Dancing in the Kitchen, and it will give you hope and help for staying in love. We're out of time right now. We've got to go. So we say goodbye, and God bless you.
Prayer changes things. If you need prayer, write to the address on the screen. Call 615-754-0039 or email prayer@ctntv.org.
Don't give in. God's word says you're an overcomer. It takes training. It takes discipline. And so when you're fighting that good fight of the faith, you take your story, whatever it is, and you saturate it in faith, and you fight for it.
Visit monicaschmelter.com to schedule Monica to speak at your next event.
When I truly turned my heart to the Lord, He took every sin I ever did away from me.
God really is your other half. God, He's the only person who can really, fill those holes and cracks in your heart that you're so wanting someone to fill.
It's no good to have a big dream if you're not putting yourself in motion to go after that.